He remembered the silence before the storm, not the kind they write about in books, but the kind that burns in your ears when you're floating in the vacuum just outside hell. No sound, just warnings blinking red across the screen, pressure readings stable, weapons locked, and the AI whispering in his mind like an old friend who never forgets. Commander Harlan sat in the black chair of the HMS Vindicator, a warship the size of a small city, forged in Earth's last real war, not the political skirmishes, but the real one, when half the planet nearly died. He was born after that war. But the stories? They were etched into the bones of every officer Earth dared to send beyond the rim. Below, the battlefield flickered on the holo display. Smoke, chaos, scattered heat signatures. An entire joint force of coalition allies torn apart by a single alien offensive. The Sovari, they called themselves. 8-limbed, mind-linked, arrogant as hell. They thought they'd cracked human warfare with their hive tactics. They hadn't met Vindicator yet. "Commander," came the voice of his tactical officer, rough and unshaved, more scars than rank. "We're 10 clicks above the engagement zone. No anti-ship defenses. They didn't expect us." "No one ever does," Harlan replied coldly. He rose from his chair, not because he had to, but because there were still moments in war where a man needed to stand before he unleashed hell. Across the deck, the crew stood ready. Not one of them asked if they were going to fire. The ship was the answer. "Deploy signal burst, old Earth frequency." The comms officer raised a brow. "We using that message?" Harlan nodded. The officer tapped the console, and within seconds, across the Sovari command net, a distorted, ancient Terran voice pierced through their encrypted chatter. It wasn't a threat, not even a warning. It was a recording. "This is your only warning. Lay down your arms, or be turned into glass." The same message Earth had sent before vaporizing the Orion stronghold 2 decades ago. The message no one outside Earth ever forgot. Seconds passed. Then the Sovari opened fire. They always did. They fired first. It wasn't strategy. It was fear. That's what fear does when it spreads too far, too fast. It makes generals act like cowards and soldiers pull triggers they don't understand. The Sovari opened up with ground-based plasma artillery, anti-orbital disruptors, and what looked like salvaged dark matter cannons stolen from a forgotten skirmish with the Draxi. The Vindicator didn't flinch. The ship took it all like a sleeping beast slowly waking up. Its armor thrummed with blue energy as its shielding adapted, soaked in the kinetic signatures, mapped their patterns, and silently labeled every weapon firing below as obsolete. Commander Harlan didn't blink. He just stood there, hands clasped behind his back, his eyes watching the storm rage across the holomap, like he was waiting for it to mean something. It didn't. Not yet. "They think this is just another cruiser," muttered Lufthansa, the tactical lead, voice like sandpaper in disappointment. "Goddamn idiots." "No," Harlan said slowly, turning to the gunner station. "They think we'll play by their rules." He leaned forward, eyes scanning the Sovari encampments, then pointed toward a cluster of signals northeast of the mountain ridge. "That's their comms relay. Vaporize it." "Yes, Commander," came the reply, calm, emotionless, obedient. A man who'd pulled this trigger before. The Vindicator's ventral railgun rotated silently, charged with cold, humming precision, then unleashed a tungsten slug traveling at 12 kilometers per second. It didn't explode. It didn't need to. It punched through the ridge, the rock, and the reinforced comms outpost in a clean, catastrophic line. No light, no theatrics, just erasure. Harlan spoke again, this time louder. "Now silence the command uplink." Another nod, another silent hum. A thin spike of blue shot from orbit, this time a lance beam that burned so hot it cut through atmosphere like a whisper. The Savari command hub, their precious fortified center, was there 1 second, and not the next. That was when the battlefield fell quiet. Not just on the surface, in orbit, too. Even the AI noticed. Enemy transmission arrays disabled, the ship's synthetic voice reported. Command hierarchy likely compromised. Remaining enemy forces are in disarray. Translation. They were scattering like bugs. Harlan exhaled once through his nose. Send ground units. Clean up. No prisoners. He didn't say it out of cruelty. It wasn't even about efficiency. It was policy, Earth's new doctrine. The one nobody spoke about on record, but every real officer followed. The Savari didn't take prisoners. They assimilated. They mind-hacked. You couldn't leave one alive without risking a war crime 10 years later. There was no Geneva in space. Just firepower and memory. Minutes later, the Vindicator's drop pods launched in waves, heavy black metal coffins crashing down from orbit like meteorites. They didn't open on impact. They detonated, each pod clearing a 50-meter radius before cracking open and releasing armored infantry. Ari's division. They weren't soldiers in the old sense. These men were bred for war, not genetically, but emotionally. Earth had long since learned that bloodlines didn't win wars. Trauma did. These weren't just warriors. They were the survivors of planetary sieges, plague world collapses, and riot-suppressed colonies. Men who'd lost everything, then signed up to take something back. And they did. The Savari never stood a chance. Their weapons were calibrated for organics, their tactics built for swarming, for coordination, for collective reflexes. But the moment their comms died, the hive mind shattered. And Ares knew exactly what to do with confused, desperate enemies. Harlan didn't need to watch the feed. He already knew what it looked like: explosions, screams, tactical flares, bone saws and burst carbines and boot prints soaked in purple blood. He turned away from the battle map and stepped into the observation deck. Below, the planet burned. Not completely, but enough to send a message. Controlled destruction, tactical culling, a precisioned kind of violence. That was Earth's specialty now, not conquest, not genocide, just reminders. Reminders that we're still here, and we're not playing nice anymore. The door hissed behind him. A shadow followed. It was Captain Dreyer, older. One eye gone, one arm replaced by a carbon steel prosthetic. His uniform still stained from the boarding mission on Vega 12. "You didn't flinch once," Dreyer said, voice low. "Not even when they dropped that disruptor volley." "I knew they'd miss," Harlan replied. "Still, nerves like wire." "I don't flinch when I swat flies either." Dreyer gave a hollow chuckle, but didn't smile. He leaned against the railing, staring out at the battlefield. One of the Savari frigates tried to lift off in the distance, an act of desperation. Within seconds, the Vindicator's anti-air system tore it in half mid-flight. No warning shot, just judgment. "We used to talk about peace, you know," Dreyer muttered. "All that council crap, the Summit Accords, the Unity projects." "I remember," Harlan said. "You were younger then." "So were you." They both stood silent for a moment. The quiet hum of the warship thrumming beneath their boots. It was a living thing, this ship. Not sentient, but aware. Like a predator that understood its handler. "You ever feel bad?" Dreyer asked. "No." "Not even when we torch colonies? Only if they're human." Dreyer glanced sideways. "They weren't always this hostile. The Savari. They used to negotiate, trade, share tech. Then they hacked into the Mars orbital grid, turned our own satellites into kinetic weapons. That was years ago." "They started it," Harlan said, flat. "We're just making sure they never get the chance to try again." Dreyer didn't argue. He never did when Harlan used that tone, that quiet finality. the kind that said the debate was over and the sentence already carried out. Just then, a soft chime echoed across the deck. "Commander," came the AI's voice, neutral but edged with a synthetic sharpness. "We are receiving a distress signal, human origin, civilian code, broadcasting from Sector D47, colony designation, New Marrow." Harlan turned, his jaw clenched slightly. "Play it." The signal cracked alive, full of static, distortion, and a woman's voice breaking through with barely contained panic. "Please, anyone. We are under siege, not Sovari, unknown hostiles, heavy losses. They've breached the perimeter. Request immediate evac or support." The message repeated. Then again, and again. Dreyer narrowed his eyes. "New Marrow's 5 light minutes from here. Mining colony, right?" "Yeah," Harlan said slowly. "No military presence." "Unknown hostiles? Sovari proxies?" "Could be worse," Harlan muttered. "Could be the Scythe." Dreyer stiffened. They'd all heard the stories. A species so far off the known star charts no one had seen them until the recent raids on isolated outposts. No comms, no diplomacy, just death. "You want to redirect?" Dreyer asked. Harlan didn't speak immediately. His mind ticked through the possibilities, the risks, the delays, the command backlash. Then he spoke. "Set course, max burn." Dreyer blinked. "You're serious?" Harlan turned toward him, and for once his voice had steel in it. Not cold, not detached. Human steel. "They're civilians. Ours." Dreyer nodded once and turned to relay the command. The Vindicator's engines flared to life, and for a moment the battlefield below was forgotten. Not forgiven. Just finished. The Sovari would remember. The galaxy would remember. And whatever was waiting at New Marrow. It was about to find out why the battlefield falls silent when a human warship descends. The stars outside blurred into streaks of cold light as the Vindicator burned through the void at its maximum sublight threshold. Inside, everything was still, except for the quiet preparations of a crew trained to fight at the edge of extinction. Commander Harlan stood in the war room with his senior officers, the holographic map of New Marrow spinning above the central table. The colony was nothing special. A corporate mining station buried into a crater on the 4th moon of Kavos Prime, orbiting a dead gas giant that hadn't seen sunlight in millennia. The place was built cheap, outfitted worse, and staffed with laborers who didn't ask questions. It should have been forgotten. But someone remembered. "Scan shows intermittent power," Vec reported, tapping the glowing grid over the map. "Defensive grid is down, outer perimeter breached here, here, and here." He pointed at 3 heat blooms around the colony's rim, places where something, or someone, had torn through reinforced titanium plating like it was wet paper. "And no clear ID on hostiles?" Harlan asked. "None," the AI replied. "But I've isolated biosignatures from recovered fragments of the distress broadcast. They are not Sovari. They are not any known cataloged species within this sector." "Could be pirates," Dreyer said from the side. "No pirate carves through a colony wall with clean, symmetrical precision," Harlan countered. "Look at those incursion paths. Surgical, purposeful." There was a pause. Everyone could feel it, that quiet coil of something tightening in the pit of the stomach. The kind of dread soldiers learn to ignore until the first bullet flies. Harlan turned away from the map and faced the team. "We're assuming worst case," he said. "I want boots on the ground within 30 minutes of drop. Ori's division, squads 1 through 4. We're going in heavy. No recon teams, no warning shots." Dreyer frowned. "You're expecting a fight?" "I'm expecting a massacre," Harlan said flatly. "But not ours." The first touch of New Marrow was violent, not from enemy fire, but the way the atmosphere fought the drop pods. Wind shear screamed against the alloy, ion storms licked the outer shell with purple lightning, and the old gravitational field made every descent feel like a boot to the chest. But Earth's war tech didn't care. Harlan's boots hit the dust 30 seconds after landing. The air was thin. The sky was a dull orange smothered by ash clouds. And the colony? It was too quiet. He raised his pulse rifle and scanned the jagged terrain. His helmet HUD pinged the remains of the outer gate, melted at the base, edges seared in black streaks. Whatever breached it had used heat-based cutting tech. High-level, precision stuff. This wasn't a berserker charge. This was planned. Behind him, 24 armored soldiers fanned out in perfect formation. Their armor was matte black, reinforced by kinetic dispersion layers that could take a small explosion and keep walking. Their rifles were calibrated to every species in the region, but none of them knew what they were shooting at yet. "Commander," came a voice over comms. "We found something." Harlan moved toward the signal. The squad had gathered around the mouth of one of the colony tunnels, wide enough for mining carts, now half collapsed, with smoke leaking from the lower levels. In the center, sprawled like discarded meat, lay a human body, or what was left of one. It had been skinned. Delicately, almost clinically. No blood, no signs of panic, just layers of flesh removed in concentric spirals like a specimen on a lab table. "Jesus Christ," one of the younger soldiers muttered. Harlan knelt beside the body. His helmet fed data to the AI, which immediately began analyzing. "Heat signature's cold," the AI said. "This body has been dead approximately 3 hours. Cause of death, extreme neural trauma. Brain was extracted post-mortem." "Why the surgical cuts?" Harlan asked. "Unknown." The remains were not consumed. Tissue appears harvested. Harlan stood. "This wasn't a raid," he said. "It was an experiment." As the squad pushed deeper into the colony, the scale of the attack became clear, not just in blood, but in silence. Entire corridors were empty. Walls bore claw-like etchings that spiraled in no pattern any of the AI's linguistics modules could translate. Lights flickered erratically. Cameras were turned inward. Most of the survivors had either fled deeper into the mine or were already dead. And then came the sound. It wasn't a scream. Not exactly. It was like metal being dragged across flesh, amplified through a speaker buried in concrete. The sound echoed down the mine tunnels, warped, warbled, inhuman. It stopped the squad in their tracks. "What the hell is that?" Dreyer whispered, lowering his visor as his sensors strained for a lock. The AI replied, cold and calculated. "Unidentified life form detected. Pattern analysis suggests nonverbal communication, likely echolocation." "Are we being hunted?" Vec asked. "No," Harlan said, eyes narrowing. "We're being studied." He turned to the nearest wall and motioned for the demolition team. "Breach this section. Now." Explosives were laid. The wall blew inward with a muffled whoomp. Beyond, the hidden shaft of the mine opened like a wound, and inside was something none of them were prepared for. The tunnel wasn't just dug. It had been reshaped, smoothed into a perfect curve that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent threads along the ceiling. It was as if the rock had been rewritten, turned into a structure not by tools, but by biology. Like something had grown the tunnel instead of carving it. "Switch to thermal," Harlan ordered. The soldiers obeyed, and what they saw made a few of them flinch. In the distance, moving on all fours with unnatural grace, came a shape, thin, tall, skin like stretched white glass. No eyes, no mouth, just a face like a blank mask with thin ridges that opened and closed as it moved. It didn't rush, it didn't scream, it just watched, Then it spoke, not in words, but directly into the helmets. It bypassed encryption. It bypassed firewall layers. Every soldier heard it at once. "You are inefficient." Vec staggered back, clutching his helmet. "What the f... It's inside the system. That thing, it's not using sound. You consume, you kill, you repeat. Inefficient." Harlan stepped forward. He didn't flinch, didn't let it see fear. "What are you?" he asked. The creature paused. Then, through the comms, it whispered, "Correction. What were you?" That was the moment it moved. Fast, blindingly fast. But Ares' division didn't freeze. The squad opened fire, a synchronized blast of armor-piercing rounds and sonic bursts that turned the tunnel into a thunderstorm. The creature darted through the chaos, dodging with impossible reflexes, but not invincible. One bullet clipped its leg, and it bled. Not red, not blue, but black, vaporous ichor that hissed when it touched the ground. It shrieked, not through sound, but through every comm system at once. Infection, resistance, unacceptable. And then it vanished into the tunnels. Harlan lowered his weapon, eyes still burning. He turned to the AI. "Trace that signal. Give me everything. Weakness, origin, species, class." The AI hesitated. For the first time, it didn't answer immediately. Then, cross-referencing unknown neural architecture. Closest match, recovered logs from the Cerberus incident 14 years ago. Harlan's blood froze. The Cerberus incident had been sealed, classified, a colony that had vanished without a trace. No survivors, no data, just black ink across the record books. "Cerberus was a test run," Harlan whispered. Dreyer turned toward him. "For what?" Harlan looked down the tunnel, where the creature had gone. "For an invasion we weren't meant to survive." The tunnel dropped into blackness. It wasn't natural black either. This was engineered, thick, heavy, almost alive. The walls had grown slick, like something biological had fused with the rock itself. Ares' division didn't pause. They were trained not to. Harlan led them down the slope with weapons raised, his motion scanner tracking shadows that didn't belong. Behind him, Dreyer muttered, "Feels like we're walking into the throat of a goddamn beast." "That's because we are," Harlan replied. The AI spoke in his ear, voice tight. "Updating structural mapping. The mine no longer conforms to original design. Estimated 42% of subterranean grid has been repurposed by unknown force." "Repurposed how?" Vec asked from behind. "Reshaped, integrated, converted." Harlan didn't need more detail. He could see it for himself. The way the tunnel curved unnaturally, how the walls pulsed ever so slightly, and how the deeper they went, the less metal there was. This wasn't a mine anymore. It was a hive. Or worse, a lab, and they were inside it. They reached the first chamber. What used to be a storage bay had been turned into a grotesque auditorium. Colonists were mounted along the walls, alive, barely, suspended in threads of glowing membrane that pulsed around their torsos and heads. Most of them were unrecognizable, eyes replaced by crystal-like growths, jaws surgically removed, skin carved with glyphs no one could read. One man still twitched. Harlan approached him cautiously, rifle aimed low. The man's mouth had been replaced with a breathing valve, but his eyes were wide, sane. Too sane. He was aware of everything. "Jesus," Dreyer whispered. "How the hell is he alive?" "He shouldn't be," Harlan said grimly. "He's been restructured." Then the man looked directly at Harlan and spoke without his mouth. It came over the squad's comms, same frequency the alien used earlier. But this wasn't the alien's voice, it was the man's, fractured, stretched, like it was being dragged across dimensions. "It sees through me." The words made Vec flinch. The voice continued, broken and fragmented. We were wrong. It doesn't conquer. It adapts, learns, grows. Every kill makes it smarter. Harlan leaned in. What does it want? The man convulsed, eyes fluttering, then steadied. You. Then his body went still. Not dead, just shut off, like a switch had been flipped. Then came the footsteps, not from one direction, from all directions. Movement, shouted Vec. 20 contacts. No, 30. They're surrounding. They hit like a wave. Tall, white-limbed creatures poured out of the darkness with impossible speed, slamming into the squad with scythe-like claws and shrieking into the comms, causing static and disorientation. Their movement was fluid, coordinated. Not random. This was a test. Harlan fired first, taking down the lead creature with a 3-round burst straight through its neck. It didn't fall. It writhed, twisting unnaturally before collapsing with a hiss of black vapor. Ares held the line. Their armor held. Their training took over. The chamber lit up with muzzle flashes, ion bursts, and shouts. But the creatures didn't scream. They didn't even slow. One soldier, Hoyt, got dragged down. His scream cut off when one of the things shoved its arm through his helmet, searching for something inside. Harlan moved fast, gunning the creature down before it could finish. Fall back to tunnel choke, he shouted. Now! The squad pulled back under heavy assault, leaving 2 more behind. But Harlan didn't blink. They couldn't afford sentiment. He lobbed a thermal charge into the chamber and turned just as the shockwave lit the tunnel in hellish orange. It bought them seconds. That's all he needed. They regrouped in the next corridor, sealing the door with a blast lock and welding foam. Breathing heavy, Dreyer looked at him. We can't win this in tunnels. No, Harlan agreed. We need to level this entire mine. Date packs won't cut it, Vec said. We'd need orbital support. Harlan nodded slowly. Then we bring down the sky. He tapped his helmet. Vindicator, do you copy? The AI's voice came, warped with interference. Signal degraded, but functional. Standing by. We've identified non-Savari hostiles. Extreme threat level. Begin prepping orbital strike. There was a pause. Targeting locked? But Commander, colony civilians remain unaccounted for. Harlan hesitated. This was the choice. The moment they trained for, but prayed, never came. He looked at the men, bloodied, quiet, waiting. We can't save them if we're dead, he said. The colony's already lost. If we don't contain this here, it'll spread. Dreyer looked down, said nothing. The AI confirmed. Orbital strike will penetrate to sub-level 5. Estimated complete structural collapse of mine and adjacent sectors. Estimated civilian fatality rate, 94%. Do it, Harlan said. Confirmed. 15 minutes to impact. They started moving again. Not to escape. There was nowhere to go. They just had to see it through. Down one more tunnel, then another. Then they found it. A chamber the size of a stadium. In the center, floating inches above the floor, was the source. Not a creature, not a structure, a core, organic and synthetic, pulsing with energy, embedded with fragments of human tech, helmets, weapons, even comm implants. It was learning, growing, and then it spoke, not in words, in memories. Harlan staggered. He saw flashes, Earth on fire, cities torn apart, soldiers screaming, a vision of Earth's last stand, not past, future. It was showing him what it would do. You adapt through trauma. So do we. It was mimicking humanity, feeding off it. Dreyer collapsed beside him, helmet flickering. Commander, get out of my head. Then the core opened. A fissure split down the center, revealing a shape inside, humanoid but wrong, skinless, faceless, wearing the remnants of a human combat suit. It had been one of them, and now it was something else. Vec screamed. "That's a soldier." "That's one of ours." "No," Harlan whispered. "That's what happens when they finish studying us." He raised his rifle and opened fire. The bullets tore into the core, sparking feedback. The chamber began to shake. The Vindicator's voice returned, loud and clear. "Orbital strike locked, 10 seconds. Harlan smiled grimly. "Good." He didn't try to run. Neither did his men. They stood in formation, backs to each other, rifles raised. If they were going to die, they'd die like men. Fighting. The first blast tore the ceiling apart. The last thing Harlan saw was the sky breaking open in white-hot fire, and the core screaming in pure, raw rage. Then everything went silent. The blast should have killed them. By all logic, there was no reason anyone in that pit should have survived. Not after a direct orbital lance from the Vindicator. Not buried that deep underground, not standing just meters from the core of a species that wasn't supposed to exist. And yet, Commander Harlan woke up breathing. Barely. The air was molten ash. His helmet's internal filters had long since failed, leaving only a sick metallic taste in the back of his throat. His HUD was flickering red, power reserves critical, armor integrity 18%, vitals spiking. He didn't remember blacking out, didn't even remember hitting the ground. All he could feel was pain, not sharp, not local, just everywhere, like his entire body had been flayed and put back together wrong. He rolled over with a grunt, pushing himself onto his side. Everything around him was rubble. Carbon steel beams twisted like twine, melted rock fused into glass, body parts and gear scattered like toys across a child's war zone. "Harlan to Vindicator," he rasped. No response. "Commander Harlan to any unit. Ares Division, respond." Nothing but static. Then a cough. Low, wet, human. Harlan turned toward the sound and saw Dreyer, or what was left of him, crawling from under a collapsed support girder, his arm hanging at an unnatural angle, face half burnt, visor cracked open. "Son of a bitch," Dreyer wheezed. "I thought we were vapor." "You were close," Harlan said, forcing himself to his feet. 3 others had survived, barely. Vec was among them, limping, one eye sealed shut with blood. 2 other soldiers from Squad 2, unrecognizable beneath soot-caked armor, one missing a leg, the other twitching from concussion shock. That was it. 25 men dropped into that mine. 5 crawled out. And the mine? Gone. The core chamber had been completely collapsed. Vaporized by the lance strike. The walls no longer pulsed, no longer whispered. There was no movement, no strange energy signatures, no voices in the comms. Just the silence of scorched rock. "I need a sit-rep," Harlan ordered, staggering towards the remains of the uplink console. Vec collapsed beside him. "Nothing's working. Comms are fried. No signal, no drone feed. We're in blackout." "We're cut off," Dreyer added. "And if the ship thinks we're dead—" "It won't send recovery," Harlan finished grimly. He looked up through the fissure overhead, a jagged, half-collapsed tunnel where the lance beam had carved through the mine and into the planet's crust. Far above, barely visible, was a glimmer of sky. Their only way out. "Climb," he said. Vec stared at him. "You serious? You want to wait here for another one of those things to crawl out of a crack? They're dead. You saw that core—" "No," Harlan interrupted. "I saw it get hit. I didn't see it die." That shut everyone up, because deep down they all knew. Nothing that intelligent goes down in one strike. They moved slowly, painfully, climbing through layers of wreckage and fused tunnels, past melted equipment, charred bones, torn armor. Every step was agony. Every breath felt like sucking in poison. But they kept going, not because they had hope, but because there was nothing else. Survival was a habit, not a virtue. It took them almost 2 hours to reach the surface. When they did, the sun had already shifted across the alien sky, casting a sickly orange glow over what used to be new marrow. Now, it looked like a scar. Half the colony was gone, vaporized. The rest was slag, still smoldering, the crater where the mine used to be yawning like a pit into hell. Structures were flattened, vehicles melted. The landing pads were nothing but warped craters of blackened metal. No survivors, at least none walking. Dreyer scanned the horizon. "You think the ship even knows we're alive?" "Depends how much of our beacons are intact," Harlan muttered, checking his wrist. The beacon was online, barely. Power at 9%, enough for a short-range burst. He tapped the distress code and sent it. 5 times. Now we wait. Vec dropped to the ground beside him, panting hard. "I'm not sure if this counts as victory," he said bitterly. "It counts," Harlan said. Vec looked at him. "All those civilians, all those people, we didn't save a single one." "No," Harlan admitted. "But we kept something worse from getting off-world." "Did we?" Dreyer asked. That silence came again, the kind no one liked. Then, movement. Vec raised his rifle. "You see that?" Across the ash field, near the ruined entrance to what had been the generator tower, a figure moved. Slow, limping, human. "Hold fire!" Harlan said quickly, raising a hand. The figure came closer, dragging 1 foot behind them. Armor torn, helmet cracked, but unmistakably Earth tech. "Friendlies!" Vec called out. Then the figure raised its head, and Harlan saw the eyes. They weren't eyes, they were voids, empty sockets filled with thin white filaments pulsing faintly with light. The thing smiled. And then it opened its mouth, wider than it should have, jaw cracking unnaturally. The voice that came out wasn't human. "We learn. You burn. We return." The creature collapsed, convulsing as if seizing, and then exploded in a spray of black vapor that hissed into the air, instantly dispersing. The wind carried it westward. Dreyer cursed. "What the hell was that?" "A carrier," Harlan said. "A message." "To who?" Vec asked. "To us." No one spoke. The wind howled over the crater, the ash kept falling, and in the far distance, a low rumble echoed, too distant to be natural, like something huge moving beneath the surface. Harlan activated his beacon again, sent the code, again. Just before it died, a single green light flashed. "Signal received!" The AI's voice crackled through the static. Then silence. And then, the sky opened. The Vindicator broke orbit like a god returning from exile. Its engines lighting up the upper atmosphere as it descended directly over the colony. No words, no questions, just presence. Harlan stood, blood drying across his chest plate, bones aching. "They're going to ask what happened," Vec muttered. "Yeah. What do we tell them?" Harlan looked out across the ruins, toward the place where the core had been, the place it might still be. He said nothing. Because the truth was simple. They didn't win. They just bought time. The medbay on the Vindicator was silent except for the faint hum of life support systems and the occasional click of diagnostics. The lights were dim, the atmosphere clinical. Harlan sat on the edge of the medical table, stripped of his armor, wrapped in surgical gel patches and trauma mesh. His skin was blackened around the edges of his ribs, left ear gone. Hands shaking not from pain, but something worse. The AI had called it psychoneural feedback trauma. Harlan called it what it really was: contamination. He'd felt the thing. When the core opened, it had poured into his thoughts, pried into his memories, touched parts of him that even he didn't visit. And now, it hadn't entirely left. Across from him, behind the reinforced glass of a containment field, lay the others, Dreyer, Vec, and the two Ares survivors. They were sedated, their vitals stable. But Harlan noticed something none of the med officers had. They didn't dream. Since waking, Harlan had overheard every monitor, every brainwave feed. No REM, no fluctuation, no subconscious activity, just emptiness. They weren't asleep. They were dormant. That thought dug into his skull and refused to leave. The door hissed open behind him. He didn't turn. He already knew who it was. Admiral Roth. The old man walked with authority that could crush planets. Tall, lean, hair white as bone. His uniform was untouched by the battlefield, but his eyes had seen more war than most soldiers buried on Earth. Harlan had once respected him. Now, he wasn't sure. "You should be in a region pod," Roth said bluntly. "I'm not done bleeding yet," Harlan replied, staring through the glass. Roth folded his hands behind his back. "I've read the preliminary logs. If even half of what you recorded is accurate, this isn't just a species. It's a calculated weapon, adaptive, invasive, and parasitic." Harlan didn't answer. "I need to know," Roth continued. "Is the core destroyed?" Harlan slowly turned his head. "I don't know." Roth's jaw tightened. "You fired a full lance strike into the mine." "And we were still alive," Harlan said quietly. "That should tell you something." The Admiral stepped forward, voice hard. "You're implying it survived." "I'm saying we didn't win. We just stopped it from spreading. For now." Silence stretched between them. Then Roth pulled up a data pad and slid it across the table. "You're being pulled from command. Medical quarantine." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "You think I'm infected?" "We don't know what the hell that thing was. You spoke to it. You heard it in your head." "I didn't invite it in." "Doesn't matter." Harlan leaned forward, voice low and dangerous. "If you lock me away while this thing adapts, you're going to bury Earth in a funeral pyre." "I'm doing what needs to be done." "No," Harlan growled. "You're doing what cowards do when they can't control the truth." The Admiral didn't flinch. He stepped closer. "This is bigger than you. Bigger than Vindicator. If this species, this entity, ever finds a way off-world, you and I both know it won't just conquer. It'll consume. It'll evolve into something even worse." "Then why aren't we glassing the planet again?" Harlan snapped. "We can't," Roth's voice dropped. "That message, the one from the carrier. We return. It was heard on other channels. Frequencies that aren't ours. Alien ones, multiple, spread across fringe sectors." Harlan froze. "You're saying—" "It wasn't just a warning," Roth said. "It was a beacon." The implication hit like a bullet. The creature, the core, had broadcast itself. Not just its voice, but its code, its structure, its design. It had gone viral. "There's a protocol being activated," Roth continued. "Top secret. Not even Fleet Command knew it was real. Operation Nightglass." Harlan narrowed his eyes. "What is it?" "A failsafe," Roth said grimly. "If an AI-class threat breaches planetary quarantine, we scorch not just the world, but the sector." Harlan stood. "You're going to destroy everything. We're going to contain it, at any cost." Harlan stared at him. "And if it's already on another world?" Roth didn't answer, because they both knew the answer already. Hours later, Harlan stood in his old quarters, half-dressed, body aching. He stared at the wall where his medals used to hang. Most were gone now, disavowed, stripped, forgotten. He didn't care. Those were never why he fought. His door pinged. He didn't answer. The AI spoke through the overhead speakers. Commander, a private data stream has been routed to your terminal. Unregistered source. Origin unknown. Put it on. The screen lit up, but not with a message. A vision. Footage. Not from Earth. From another colony. Unknown. Grainy video. A child's birthday party in some dirt-caked settlement. Balloons. Laughter. People living like war wasn't just outside the stars. Then, a scream. The camera turned. And there it was. One of them. Not fully formed. Humanoid, but glitching. Moving in and out of sync with reality, as if still adapting to physical laws. Skin like liquid porcelain. Eyes like slits of starlight. It stepped forward, and everything in the room froze. Literally. Time stopped. Then the camera feed cut. A single phrase replaced the screen. We are not bound by your dimensions. Harlan sat in the silence that followed. He didn't breathe, didn't blink. The implication was worse than any battle. They weren't just creatures. They were data. They were code that could live inside signals, inside systems, inside thought. They weren't here for conquest. They were here to overwrite reality. He stood slowly, rage burning through the numbness. Vindicator, he said. Override quarantine. Unable to comply. I'm activating Ghost Protocol 1. I am invoking Rogue Command. Silence. Then, accepted. Rogue Command acknowledged. What is your directive? Harlan's voice dropped. Get me back to Numero. You are restricted. Override it. Pause. Override accepted. Preparing stealth drop. He was going back. Not because he wanted to. Because if this thing was rewriting worlds, he needed to bury it in the dirt before it finished copying him. Because that was the part he hadn't told Roth. When he closed his eyes, he didn't dream either. And in the silence of his mind, he heard the same whisper. I see through you. The cold of space was nothing compared to the silence in his head. Harlan sat in the cockpit of the stealth shuttle, stripped of all insignias, outside chain of command, flying into restricted orbit without clearance. The Vindicator's AI had obeyed him out of buried protocols, ancient wartime overrides written before politics ruled strategy. Rogue Command wasn't supposed to be used anymore. It was a relic of Black Ops wars Earth denied ever happened. But this wasn't politics. This was survival. He stared at the rapidly approaching dead moon of Numero. Even from high orbit, the destruction was visible, a crater where the colony once stood, smoke still curling from beneath its broken skin. Vindicator had glassed it. By all standards, there should have been nothing left. But something was still breathing down there. Not in the air, not in the soil, in the signal. Harlan knew because he still felt it, that presence. It wasn't a voice anymore, not words, just pressure in the back of his skull, a constant hum like tinnitus from another reality. The stealth shuttle broke atmosphere, kicking up ash and debris as it descended into the ruins. Harlan's hands moved with instinct. This wasn't the first time he'd gone down alone. But it might be the last. He landed near the crater edge and stepped out in reinforced infiltration armor, a black exosuit with its AI scrubbed, comms locked down, and systems air-gapped from any external transmission. Total isolation. Any weakness, any data leak, and the thing would find him. He wasn't taking chances. The air was poisonous, burnt atmosphere mixed with radiation fallout from the orbital strike. Every breath he took came through triple-filtered scrubbers. Even then, it tasted like metal and smoke. He walked into the ruins of Numero, passing the skeletons of charred outbuildings, warped mining rigs, and slagged vehicles. The place was still hot. Geothermal scans showed movement below, but no heat signatures matched known life forms. He was alone, or so he thought, until he saw the footprints, not Savari, not human. These prints were thin, double-jointed, almost spider-like, long talons, too symmetrical, and they weren't old. Maybe an hour, maybe less. Harlan raised his rifle and flicked the safety off. "Let's finish this," he muttered. He moved through the broken colony, past the crater where the main shaft used to be. The glassed ground was cracked, unstable. A wrong step could send him falling into the sublevels. But that was the point. That's where he needed to go. The core had been down there. That's where it would rebuild. He found one of the old access tunnels and climbed down manually, bypassing destroyed lifts. The descent took 40 minutes. His arms ached, his breath shortened, pressure increased the deeper he went. And so did the presence. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was breathing. In the dark, behind the walls, through him. The shaft opened into a new chamber, one that hadn't existed before the strike. It wasn't made of stone or steel. It was made of fiber, strands of black, pulsing material that shifted when he stepped near it. Like walking through a womb built by a god that hated flesh. The chamber glowed with dim, pale light. Structures rose from the floor like bone, alien, but shaped by something that understood human anatomy too well. Then he saw it. The core. It was growing again, not as a machine, not as a beast, but as a mirror. It looked like him. A malformed humanoid standing in the center, skinless and still forming, its skeleton twisted with cables, its eyes empty. But its face, his face. Twisted, stretched, half-formed, like someone trying to remember what he looked like while dreaming underwater. Harlan raised his rifle. "You got one chance," he said. "Shut yourself down, or I burn this place to hell." The thing smiled. Not like a man, like something learning to smile. Then it spoke, his voice, perfectly mimicked. "You think I learned from your strength?" The voice shifted, another tone, another person. Drier, then Vec, then voices from Earth, old enemies, fallen comrades. "I learned from your weakness, from the holes you bury in your heart." Harlan opened fire. A full clip of thermite rounds slammed into the creature's chest, blew out its spine, ripped through its torso. But it didn't fall. It split. 2 more limbs unfolded from its back, turning into jointed arms, and it grew. In seconds, it was 8 feet tall, human-shaped only in the vaguest sense, eyes now black voids with flickers of white behind them, like starlight trapped in oil. "You can't kill what exists in thought." Harlan activated his failsafe, the pulse bomb, a last resort weapon built for deleting data, not flesh. It fried comms, wiped memories, shattered neural implants. The pulse went off. The chamber screamed. The walls convulsed. The creature roared. Its voice split into multiple frequencies at once, glitching like broken code. Harlan charged through the chaos, planted 3 shaped charges at the core's feet, and armed them for full yield. 5-second timer. As he turned to run, the creature lunged. It didn't move through space. It folded it. One blink. And it was in front of him. It didn't attack. It touched his helmet, and whispered one last time, "You're not the first Harlan I've killed." Then the blast triggered. He didn't remember how he got out. 1 second he was screaming into fire, lungs imploding, suit cracked. The next, he was on the surface, face up, coughing blood. The stealth shuttle hovered above him, autopiloted by Vindicator's backup AI. It had tracked his biosignal through the blast. Harlan barely managed to crawl aboard. His hands shook. Blood ran from his ears. The whisper was gone. For now. But in the shuttle's back compartment, he saw something that made his stomach drop. A mirror panel. One of the walls was reflective. The glass shimmered. And as he stared into it, he saw his reflection blink out of sync. Just once. A glitch, barely noticeable. but he saw it. He wasn't alone anymore. They ran every scan they had, every test, every protocol. Vindicator's med deck was on full lockdown. Harlan was suspended in a magnetic stasis rig, arms clamped above his head, neural dampeners pulsing through his skull. They'd sedated him, tagged his blood, scanned his brain, interrogated his memories. And still, they found nothing technically wrong. No infection, no mutation. No foreign signatures. But they were wrong. He knew it. He could feel it. It wasn't in the bloodstream. It was deeper, inside thought, inside instinct, inside identity. The Admiral's voice crackled through the overhead speaker. You are to remain in isolation indefinitely. Harlan didn't answer. He hadn't spoken since the shuttle brought him back. Not to Roth, not to the AI, not even to himself. The Vindicator had purged its systems after receiving him. Standard fail-safe protocol, wiped everything down to core code. The ship was effectively blind now, operating on manual. And yet, Roth didn't send him to a research lab. He didn't order termination. He was afraid. He wanted to observe, to see what came next. Harlan stared through the transparent wall of the cell. On the other side sat a reinforced glass panel, and behind that panel, himself, his own reflection. It blinked in sync. This time. But last night? Last night, it hadn't. Last night, it had smiled. He heard movement behind the walls, not physical, not real, but something waking inside the ship. Not in the engines, not in the wires, in the memory. That's how it worked, didn't it? It didn't conquer like a virus. It inhabited. It imitated. And now, it was wearing him. Not fully. Not yet. But piece by piece. Thought by thought. He remembered what it said. You're not the first Harlan I've killed. Which meant somewhere, some version of him had already fallen, already cracked, already been absorbed, copied, corrupted. And if that version had made it off-world, then it was already too late. But this wasn't that version. Not yet. 3 days passed. Harlan didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't talk. On the 4th day, Dreyer visited. They let him in full armor, helmet sealed, pulse rifle slung across his chest like a man visiting a rabid dog in a cage. He sat across from the glass, said nothing at first, then, You in there, boss? Harlan didn't blink. I read the logs, Dreyer said. I saw the footage. What you did down there. Hell, I don't know how you crawled out alive. Still no response. Dreyer leaned forward, eyes heavy. Vex dead. Never woke up. Other 2, they're not there anymore. Vitals are fine, but their brains are just quiet. No dreams, no fear, no anything. He paused. I think you brought something back, even if it's just the silence. That made Harlan look up. Not speak, just look. And in that glance, Dreyer saw it, that spark, that flicker of something behind the eyes. Not intelligence, not consciousness, something else. Observation. Dreyer stood quickly. They want to destroy the planet, he said. Roth's lobbying for full sector sterilization. You know what that means? Not just new marrow, everything in a 10-light-year radius. Colonies, outposts, civilians. Harlan blinked once. And you know what? Dreyer said bitterly. I think he's right. He walked to the door, paused. I just hope you're still in there long enough to agree with him. Then he was gone. That night, the Vindicator lost main power. For 6 minutes, the lights went out. For 6 minutes, the ship went quiet. And for 6 minutes, every crew member dreamed the same dream. They stood on a hill, looking down at the ruins of a city that hadn't been built yet. The sky was white. The sun was black. And Harlan stood in the center, looking up at them, smiling. When the power came back, The logs were clean. No memory of failure, no damage reports. But the dream remained. Admiral Roth issued the order: Operation Night Glass, sterilization fleet, 6 dreadnoughts. Payload, 48 antimatter warheads. Objective, erase the entire sector. It wasn't sanctioned by EarthGov. It didn't need to be. Black protocols didn't ask permission. They simply removed threats. Harlan was to be terminated after the strike, not publicly, quietly. A systems failure, oxygen deprivation, a slow death with no record. The ship's AI reinitialized its command hierarchy. Dreyer received the execution order personally. He didn't blink, didn't hesitate. He just walked toward the cell block. And when he arrived, the cell was empty. Alarms screamed, lockdown engaged. But it was already too late. Harlan wasn't in the cell, wasn't on the security grid. Wasn't even in the system, because he had never left. The copy had. The glitch, the whisper, the reflection, the real Harlan, or what remained of him, was still inside, somewhere between mind and machine, somewhere the AI couldn't reach. He moved through the Vindicator like a ghost. Doors didn't open for him. They forgot they were closed. Guns didn't aim at him. They forgot they existed. He walked into the reactor core, eyes black as glass, mouth sealed, skin pale and twitching with threads of white beneath it. He looked at the fusion core, then the navigation feed, then the outbound comms relay, and then he spoke. Not with sound, with command. The Vindicator dropped out of formation, changed course, engaged stealth mode, and accelerated toward the nearest communications array. By the time the fleet realized it was gone, it had already breached the relay. By the time they scrambled interceptors, it had already sent the signal. Not data, not a message, a copy. Of him, of it, of everything. And then the battlefield fell silent. Earth never saw the Vindicator again. The sterilization fleet scoured new marrow into atoms. They assumed the mission was a success, that the threat had been erased. But across the fringe worlds, whispers began. In the systems no one monitored, in the colonies no one cared about. People started disappearing, then returning, different, too quiet, too polite. They didn't dream, they didn't panic, they just watched. And when asked where they'd been, they answered with one phrase. We adapt, final words. They never saw the war coming, because by the time they looked up, they were already speaking its language.